What's going on, everyone? It is Chrono here, the Aussie on the Games Roundtable channel, back again with another chapter of the Toll. Today we are on chapter 23. We're back again with Sonic, but we've got Tails now. Tails ain't a Build-A-Bear, but he's just here. You see it, look at us squad. Anyway, Freak is almost better. He's getting so close to being able to get back into story times. He's been reading along. And without further ado, let's jump into chapter 23 of the Toll, where we speak about more Curate Symphonius. Commentary of Curate Symphonius. Do not be misled. Death itself is not the enemy, for it is our belief that natural death must come to all in their time. Unnatural death is that of which this verse speaks. It is another reference to scythes, which most assuredly did exist. Supernatural beings who devoured the souls of the living in order to gain dark magical powers. That the Toll could fight such beings is evidence of his own divinity. Coda's analysis of Symphonius. There is no disrupting that scythes existed in the time of the Toll, and for all we know, they may still exist in the places behind. However, to suggest that they devoured souls is a stretch even for Symphonius, who tends to prefer hearsay and conjecture to evidence. It is important to note that scholars have reached a general consensus that scythes did not devour the souls of their victims, they merely consumed their flesh. Chapter 23. How to Glean a Holy Man. The Toll was not supposed to tread the halls and courtyards of the cloisters alone. The curates were constantly telling Grayson this. They were like overprotective parents. Did he have to remind them that there were dozens of guards around the perimeter and on the rooftops? That the Thunderhead's cameras were constantly watching? What the hell were they worried about? It was a little past 2 a.m. when Grayson rolled out of bed and put his slippers on. "What's wrong, Grayson?" the Thunderhead said, even before he was fully out of bed. "Is there something I can do for you?" More strangeness. It was unlike the Thunderhead to speak without provocation. "Just having trouble sleeping," he told it. "Perhaps it's intuition," the Thunderhead said. "Perhaps you're sensing something unpleasant that you can't quite put your finger on." "The only thing unpleasant that I can't put my finger on lately is you." The Thunderhead had no response to that. "If you're unsettled, might I suggest a long-distance journey to calm your nerves?" "What? Right now? In the middle of the night?" "Yes. Just up and leave." "Yes." "Why would that calm my nerves?" "It would be a wise course of action at this juncture." Grayson sighed and moved towards the door. "Where are you going?" the Thunderhead asked. "Where do you think? To get something to eat." "Do not forget to take your earpiece." "Why? So I can listen to you nagging at me?" The Thunderhead hesitated for a moment, then said, "I promise I will not, but you need to wear it. I cannot emphasize this enough." "Fine." Grayson grabbed the earpiece from his nightstand, and slipped it into his ear, if only to shut the Thunderhead up. The Toll was kept at a distance from most of the staff. Morrison suspected he had no idea how many people worked behind the scenes of his simple life, because they were always scurried like mice when they saw him coming. To the Toll, a fortress manned by dozens upon dozens of people appeared to be mostly deserted. It was as if the curates wanted it. The Toll needs his privacy. The Toll needs peace to be alone with his great thoughts. Late each night, Morrison could be found in the kitchen, making sauces, preparing batters for the morning pastries. But the real reason was so that he'd be in the kitchen when the Toll came down for a midnight snack. Finally, 5 days in, his opportunity came. After finishing up the pancake batter for the next morning, he turned off the lights and waited in a corner, dozing in and out, when someone in satin pajamas came downstairs and opened the refrigerator. In the oblique light of the fridge, Morrison could see a young man who seemed no older than he, 21 or 22 at most. He didn't look like anything special, certainly not the holy man that everyone whispered of, and was so intimidated by. Morrison expected the Toll to have a tangled beard, a wild mane, and crazy eyes. All this guy had was bed hair and eye crust. Morrison took a step out of the darkness. "Your sonority," he said. The Toll flinched, nearly dropping the plate of cheesecake in his hand. "Who's there?" Morrison came forward into the light of the open refrigerator. "Just the pastry," said your sonority. "I didn't mean to frighten you." "It's okay," the Toll said. "You just caught me by surprise." I'm actually glad to meet you. I've been waiting to tell you what a great job you're doing. You sure are better than the last one. Well, said Morrison, I've been training for years. It was hard to believe that the Thunderhead would choose this unremarkable, unassuming guy to be its voice on Earth. Maybe the naysayers were right, and it all was just a scam. All the more reason to put him out of his misery. Morrison stepped closer, opened a drawer, and pulled out a fork. He held it to the Toll. This, Morrison knew, would appear to be a sincere gesture, and it would put him close to the Toll, close enough to grab him and break his neck. I'm glad that you like my baking, Morrison said, handing the fork to him. It means a lot to me. The Toll dipped the fork into the cheesecake, took a bite, and savored it. I'm glad that you're glad, he said. Then the Toll raised the fork and jabbed it into the Morrison's eye. Grayson knew. He knew without question, and not from anything that the Thunderhead had said. He knew because of the Thunderhead's silence. It suddenly fell into place for Grayson. All this time, the Thunderhead had been trying to warn him without actually warning him. The suggestions to leave, they were not about travelling, they were about escaping. And the bath, being in hot water, Grayson cursed himself for being too literal a thinker to figure it out. The Thunderhead couldn't directly warn him, because that would be blatant interference in Scythe's business, which was against the law. The Thunderhead could do countless things, but it was incapable of breaking the law. All it could do was helplessly watch as Grayson was gleaned, but the silence in his earpiece that spoke louder than any alarm. When the chef had stepped out of the shadows and Grayson flinched, it was more than just a flinch. His heart leaped. His fight-or-flight response was nearly triggered. In the past, whenever that happened, the Thunderhead was always quick to soothe him. It's only the pastry chef, the Thunderhead should have said in his ear. He was merely hoping to catch a glimpse of you. Please treat him kindly. But the Thunderhead didn't say that. It was nothing at all. Which meant that the man before him was a scythe, and he was about to be gleaned. Grayson had never done anything as violent as what he had just done. Even during his days as Slade Bridger, he had never engaged in something so reprehensible as an attack with a sharp object. But he knew it was warranted. He knew that the Thunderhead would understand. And so, with the deed done, he ran for his life from the kitchen without looking back. Scythe Morrison would have screamed with volume to match the great resonance if he'd let himself, but he bit back into a single yelp, and fighting the pain, pulled the fork from his eye. Unlike many of the New Order scythes, he had not dialed down his pain nanities, so they were already dousing him with mega doses of painkillers, making him woozy and dizzy. He had to fight that as much as the pain, because he needed to stay sharp if he was going to fix this mess. He had been so close. If only he had dispensed with the charade immediately and done what he'd come to do, the Toll would be dead by now. How could Morrison have been so sloppy? The holy man knew the Scythe's intentions, knew his purpose there. Either he was clairvoyant, or the Thunderhead had told him something. Or something Morrison did had given him away. He should have anticipated the possibility of being exposed. With one hand on his damaged eye, he took off after the Toll, determined that there would be no more mistakes. He would complete his mission. It wouldn't be as clean as he wanted it to be. In fact, it would be messy, but it would get done. "Scythe!" yelled Grayson as he ran from the kitchen. "Help! There's a scythe!" Someone must have heard him. Stone walls echoed every sound, but they also sent sound bouncing in unexpected directions. All the guards were positioned on the outside, and on the rooftops, not in the residence. By the time they heard him and took action, it might be too late. "Scythe!" His slippers were slowing him down, so he got rid of them. The only advantage that Grayson had was that he knew the cloisters better than his attacker did, and Grayson also had the Thunderhead. "I know you can't help me," he said to it. "I know it's against the law, but there are some things you can do." Still, the Thunderhead didn't respond. Grayson heard a door open behind him. Someone screamed. He couldn't turn around to see who it was or what had happened. "I have to think like this Thunderhead. It can't interfere. It can't do anything of its own will to help me. So what can it do?" The answer was simple. When he thought of it that way, the Thunderhead was humanity's servant, which meant it could follow commands. "Thunderhead," said Grayson. "I'm ready to take that journey now. Awaken the staff and tell them that we'll be leaving immediately." "Of course, Grayson," it said. and all at once every bedside alarm in the complex began to blare. Every single light came on. The hallways were blinding. The courtyards were doused by floodlights. He heard someone else yell out behind him. He turned to see a man fall to the ground at the hands of the scythe, who was gaining on Grayson. "Thunderhead, it's too bright," said Grayson. "It's hurting my eyes. Turn off the lights in the interior corridors." "Of course," the Thunderhead said calmly. "I'm sorry to have caused you discomfort." The lights in the hallway went out again. Now he couldn't see a thing, since his pupils had constricted against the bright light, and it would be the same for the scythe. Blinded by light, then blinded by darkness. Grayson came to a T, where the hallway went left and right. Even in the dark, he knew the scythe was coming, and knew which way he needed to go. As Morrison left the kitchen, he could see the Toll scrambling ahead of him, kicking off his slippers. The Toll called for help, but Morrison knew he'd reach the Toll before anyone else would arrive. A door opened beside him, and a woman stepped out. No clue who she was. Didn't care. Before she could say anything, he jammed the heel of his hand into her nose, breaking it and sending the bone deep into her brain. She screamed and crumbled to the ground, dead before her head hit the stone. It was his first gleaning of the night, and he was determined that it not be his last. Then the lights came on bright enough to illuminate the whole hallway. He squinted against the sudden brilliance. Another door opened. The sous chef came out of his room, his bedside alarm blaring inside. "What's going on here?" Morrison punched him in the chest with heart-stopping force, but with only one eye, his depth perception was off. It took a second punch to do the job, and as Mustonus had removed their nanities, there was nothing to restart his heart. He pushed the dying man out of his way and continued after the Toll. But just as quickly as the lights came on, they went off, and when they did, he was in total darkness. Refusing to slow down, he barreled forward and slammed against the stone wall. A dead end? No. As his eyes began to readjust in the dark, he could see the hallway now went off to the left and right. But which passageway had the Toll taken? Behind him, he heard the commotion of the complex waking up. Guards being mobilized. They knew there was an intruder now. He had to move fast. Which way to go? Left or right? He chose left. He had a 50% chance of being correct. He'd faced worse odds. Grayson threw himself down the stairs, then pushed open the door into the garage, where over a dozen cars were parked. "Thunderhead," he said. "I'm ready for my journey. Open the door to the closest car." "Door opening," said the Thunderhead. "Enjoy your trip, Grayson." A car door opened. The light came on the side. Grayson had no intention of leaving the garage. All he had to do was get into the car and close the door. Its glass was unbreakable. Its polycarbonate doors could stop a bullet. Once he was inside, he'd be like a turtle in its shell. The scythe would not be able to get to him no matter how hard he tried. He lunged for the door, and behind him, the scythe lurched for his leg, grabbing him and pulling him down just short of safety. "Nice try," the scythe said. "Almost made it, too." Grayson spun and squirmed. He knew the moment the scythe had a good grip on him, it was over. Luckily, his pajamas were slippery satin, and the scythe couldn't get him into a gleaming position. "You don't want to do this," Grayson said. "If you glean me, the Thunderhead will be lost to humanity. I'm its only link." The scythe put his hand around Grayson's neck. "I don't care." But there was enough hesitation in his voice that Grayson knew he did care, even only just a little. But that could mean the difference between life and death for Grayson. "It sees what you're doing," Grayson whispered through his rapidly closing windpipe. It can't stop you, or even hurt you, but it can punish everyone you've ever loved." The pressure on his windpipe eased just a bit. The Thunderhead would never pursue vengeance, but the scythe didn't know that. He'd figure out that it was a bluff, though. Maybe just in a moment or two, but every instant one was a victory. "The Thunderhead has a glorious plan for you," Grayson said. "It wants you to become Highblade." "You don't even know who I am." "What if I do? You're a liar." And then suddenly music began to play in Grayson's ear. A Mortal Age song he didn't know, but knew it was playing for a reason. The Thunderhead couldn't help him, but it could lay before him the tools to help himself. "You knew that it would be untrue," Grayson said, repeating the lyric. Not sure if he was getting it entirely right. "You knew that I would be a liar." And the scythe's eyes went wide. He froze in disbelief, as if those words were a magic spell. Then Tonus guards flooded into the room and grabbed the scythe. He managed to glean two of them with his bare hands before they overwhelmed him and pinned him to the ground. It was over, Scythe Morrison knew. They were going to kill him, and the only fire that they would be lighting would be the one to burn his body before he could be revived. He was being ended today at the hands of Tonus. Could there be a more humiliating way to die? Perhaps it was better this way, he thought. Better than having to face Goddard after such a dismissal failure. But then the Toll stepped forward. "Stop," he said. "Don't kill him." "But your sonority," said a man with grey thinning hair. "Not a guard. Maybe one of the priests of their strange religion. We have to kill him quickly. He must be made an example so that they don't attempt this again. Ending his life is just going to start a war, and we're not ready to fight." The man was clearly irritated. "Your sonority, I must advise against—" "I didn't ask for your opinion, Curate Mendoza. This is my call." Then the Toll turned to the guards. "Lock the scythe up somewhere until I decide what to do with them." The curate tried once more to protest, but the Toll ignored him, and Morrison was dragged out. Funny, but suddenly the Toll in his satin pajamas didn't seem as ridiculous as he had just moments ago. He seemed just a little bit like a holy man. "What were you thinking?" Curate Mendoza paced the Toll's suit, furious with him. There were guards at every door and window now. Too late to make a difference. Foolish boy, thought Mendoza. He was warned to not go anywhere alone, much less at night. He brought this on himself. "And why did you let him live? Killing that scythe and burning him would have sent a clear message to Goddard," Mendoza told him. "Yes," the Toll agreed, "and that message would be the Tonists are getting too defiant and need to be wiped out. He already wants to wipe us out. Wanting to and actually mobilizing his scythe to do it are two different things," the Toll insisted. The longer we keep Goddard from boiling over, the more time it gives us to get ready to fight him off. Don't you see that?" Mendoza crossed his arms. It was obvious to him what was going on here. "You're a coward," he said. "You're just afraid to do something so audacious to kill a scythe." The Toll stepped forward and squared his shoulders. "If you call me a coward again, you'll be sent back to your monastery, and that will be the end of your service to me." "You wouldn't dare." "Guard," the Toll said, gesturing to the closest one. "Please escort Curate Mendoza to his chambers and lock him in there until the noon bell for his disrespect." Without hesitation, the guard stepped forward and grabbed the curate, making it clear whose orders he and all the guards obeyed. Mendoza shook the guard off. "I'll walk myself." But before he left, Mendoza paused, took a deep breath, and turned back to the Toll. "Forgive me, your sonority," he said. "I was out of line." But even to him, it sounded more psychopathic than sincere. Once Mendoza was gone, Grayson just about collapsed into the chair. It was the first time he had ever stood up to Mendoza like that, but the Toll could not allow himself to be intimidated, even by the man who had made him. It should have felt good to put the curate in his place, but it didn't. Perhaps that was why the Thunderhead had chosen him over all others. While others were corrupted by power, Grayson didn't even like the taste of it. Or maybe he could develop a taste. Perhaps he would need to. The cloister did not have a dungeon. It was only designed to resemble a medieval structure, not actually function as one. Instead, Morrison was relegated to what would have been someone's office in the days when the place had been a museum. The Tonus guards were not exactly trained for this sort of thing. They didn't have shackles of any sort. Such artifacts could only be found in museums today, and not this kind of museum. So they secured them with plastic garden ties that were used for training the bougainvilleas to stone walls. There were way too many guards. One on each appendage would have done the job, but they put half a dozen on each arm and each leg, and pulled them so tight that Morrison's heads were turning purple, and his feet were ice cold. All Morrison could do was wait until his fate was decided. It must have been around dawn when he heard a conversation just outside the closed door. "But your sonority," he heard one of the guards say. "You shouldn't go in there. He's dangerous." "Do you have him tied up?" he heard the Toll ask. "Yes." "Can he break free?" "No. We made sure he couldn't." "Then I don't see the problem." The door opened. The Toll stepped in. He closed the door behind him. His bed hair had been combed, and he was now wearing a ritualistic outfit. It looked uncomfortable. Scythe Morrison didn't know whether to thank the Toll for saving him or curse him for leaving him like this, bested and humiliated. "So," Morrison said sulkily, "the Thunderhead has a plan for me, huh?" "I was lying," the Toll said. "You're a Scythe. The Thunderhead can't have a plan for you. It can't have anything to do with you." "But it told you who I was." "Not really. But I eventually figured it out, Scythe Morrison." Scythe Morrison, right? Your patron historic wrote these lyrics I recited." He didn't respond, just waited for whatever came next. "Your eye looks like it's healed already." "Almost," Morrison said. Still blurry. Most Tonus removed their healing entities. Did you know that? I think it's pretty stupid. Morrison met his glaze, blinking his healing eye to get a gauge on the toll. The Tonus spiritual leader calling their behavior stupid? Was this a test? Was he supposed to disagree? Agree? Isn't there a mortal age word for what you're saying? Morrison said. Blasphemy? Blasphemy? Blasphemy, that's it. The Toll looked over at him for a moment before he spoke again. Do you believe that the Thunderhead speaks to me? Morrison didn't want to answer the question. But what did it matter now? Yes, I believe it, he admitted. I wish I didn't, but I do. Good. That will make this easier. Then the Toll sat down in a chair across from him. The Thunderhead didn't choose me because I was a Tonist. I'm not. Not really. It chose me because someone had to be chosen. The Tonists were the first to believe it, though. My appearance fit with their doctrine. So now I'm the Toll. Tone made flesh. The funny thing is, I once wanted to be a Nimbus agent. Now I'm the Nimbus agent. Why are you telling me this? The Toll shrugged. Because I feel like it. Haven't you heard? The Toll can do whatever the Toll feels like. Almost like a scythe. Silence fell between them. It felt awkward to Morrison, but it didn't seem to feel that way to the Toll. He just stared at Morrison, pondering, cogitating, thinking whatever deep thoughts a holy man who wasn't actually holy thought. We're not going to tell Goddard that you failed in your mission. That was something Morrison wasn't expecting to hear. You're not? See, the thing is, no one, not even the Scythedom, knows who the Toll actually is. You gleaned 4 people last night. Who's to say that one of them wasn't the Toll? And if I suddenly vanish from public view, without explanation, it's going to look like you succeeded. Morrison shook his head. Goddard's going to find out eventually. Eventually is the key word. He won't find out until we're ready for him to. That could be years, if we want it to be. He'll know something's wrong when I don't come back. No, he'll just think you were captured and burned. And the sad thing is, he won't even care. Morrison cannot deny that the Toll was right. Goddard wouldn't care, not in the least. Like I said, the Thunderhead doesn't have a plan for you, the Toll told Morrison. But I do. Grayson knew he had to sell it, and sell it well. And he had to read the scythe like he'd never read anyone before, because if he miscalculated, it would be disastrous. I've been reading up on immortal age customs when it comes to leaders during dangerous times, Grayson said. In some cultures, rulers and spiritual leaders were protected by trained assassins. I'd feel much safer with one of those than these Tonists who think they're guards. The Scythe took his head, incredulously, at the suggestion. The Scythe shook his head, incredulously at the suggestion. You put out my eye, and now you want me to work for you? Grayson shrugged. Your eye grew back, and you needed a job, he said. Or would you rather go back to Goddard and tell him that you failed? That a weakling in pajamas stabbed you in the eye and escaped? I don't think that will sit very well with him. How do you know I won't clean you the second you set me free? Because I don't think you're that stupid. Being the Toll's personal scythe is much better than anything Goddard would ever offer you. And you know it. I would be the laughingstock of the Scythedom. Grayson offered him the faintest of grins. Aren't you all ready, Scythe Morrison? Morrison had no way of knowing how much the Toll knew about him, but it was true. Morrison wasn't respected, and nothing he had done changed that. But if he stayed here, the other Scythes wouldn't even know he was alive, and he would be respected. Maybe it was only by Tonists, but it was still respect, and that was something he desperately wanted. I'll tell you what, said the Toll. Why don't I take the first leap of faith? Then he pulled out a pair of scissors and amazingly began cutting Morrison's bonds. He started down at his feet, then moved up to his arms, slowly, meticulously snipping each one. The curates won't be happy, the Toll said as he snipped. Screw the curates. Then, when the last one was cut, Morrison leaped up and clammed a hand around the Toll's throat. You just made the biggest mistake of your life, Morrison growled. Go ahead, clean me, the Toll said, not an ounce of fear in his voice. You'll never escape. Even with their bumbling, you can't get past so many guards. It's not like you're a scythe Lucifer. That just made him squeeze a little bit tighter, tight enough to shut him up. The Toll was right. Right about so many things. If Morrison completed his mission, he'd be killed and burned by the Tonus outside that door. They'd both be dead, and the only winner would be Goddard. Are you done? The Toll rasped. And somehow, having him in this position, Knowing that he could glean a toll if he wanted to was just as satisfying as actually gleaning him, but without the unpleasant consequence of having to die as well. Morrison released his grip, and the toll sucked in a deep breath. "So what do I do now? Take a pledge of loyalty?" said Morrison, only half joking. "A simple handshake will do," the toll said. Then he put out his hand. "My real name is Grayson, but you'll have to call me your sonority." Morrison gripped the toll's hand with the same one that had just been at the toll's throat moments ago. "My real name's Joel, but you'll have to call me Jim." "It's nice to meet you, Jim." "Same here, your sonority." Scythe Morrison had to admit this was the last way he had expected this day to go. But all things considered, he couldn't complain. And he didn't, for more than 2 years. Well, would you look at that? I'm leaving off at part 3, Year of the Cobra, which I'm assuming is when Freak will be picking back up. So this is probably going to be the last story time that I'm on. Well, at least for the toll. I do enjoy reading out loud. I just have a bit of glitches every now and then. And my voice dies on me. But no, it's a lot of fun. I really do like reading aloud. And because I'm a voice actor, it's good practice, honestly. You'll notice that I do have a trouble with the toll, saying the toll. I sound a bit dumb. But that is it for chapter 23. Now, topic of the day. What's a hobby that you guys have wanted to try and triumph, but have never taken the time to, or are too nervous to? For me, it's actually writing. I've always wanted to write books as well, because I've got so many ideas up here. So many ideas that I want to craft into, cartoons, or animation, or movies, live action. But the issue is that I don't have the ability to do that, because, the only thing that I can really do is actual live action editing and such. But the problem is getting actors and stuff like that, and I feel like it would just be easier to put it all in a book, but then you've got to script a whole set of things. I don't know, maybe it's something I'll look into. But what about you guys? Do you guys have anything? Do some of you want to be filmmakers? Do some of you want to be musicians? Let us know down below in the comment section. Anyway guys, I hope you did enjoy, and if you did, please hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the notification bell so you know when the next video is uploaded on this channel. Anyway guys, peace out.